Hey folks, I'm going to quickly show you how you can add OAuth authentication to your Zuplo hosted MCP servers. If you look on the screen, I have an API inside of the Zuplo API gateway. It is our starter template API, which is just a basic to-do list API that sits on top of a mock server. It's got 4 endpoints for get all to-dos, create new to-dos, update and delete to-dos. And I've gone ahead and I've already created an MCP server for this API. It exists on the /MCP route, and I'm using our MCP server handler to point it at the routes I have set up on my API already. And what this is doing is exposing all of the routes that I have, all 4 of these here, as MCP compatible tools. So if I jump into the MCP inspector, I can show you what this looks like. I'll put in my URL, add the MCP route right here, and set the transport type to streamable HTTP. And I can go ahead and connect to it and list out those tools. So that's what's coming directly from the API gateway as an MCP server right now. But you can see that nothing here involved any kind of authentication whatsoever. So anybody could access this and start using those tools and doing things with it. So what I'm going to do is actually add OAuth authentication on this so that there is an authentication step before being able to connect to the MCP server. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the Zuplo project, and here on the MCP server route in the policies section, I'm going to add a new policy to the inbound requests. And the policy I want to use in this case is going to be an Auth0 JWT auth policy. Now I'm using Auth0 for this demonstration because that's what I already have set up, but you could use anything. You can use Auth0, you can use Okta, you can use Clark. Anything that is OAuth 2.0 compatible will work, so you can bring any IDP that you're already using to this, but just for this demonstration I'm using Auth0, but the setup steps for those are incredibly similar. There's maybe a few little differences in this next step, but in our documentation you'll find exactly what you need to do for each of the different policies to get them set up, and the approach around it is exactly the same. So I need to do some settings here on this particular policy. So I'm going to have to provide an audience, an Auth0 domain, and I'm also going to have to change this as well. But let's get the first two. So the audience, if I head over to my Auth0 account, is actually here in the Applications APIs OAuth doc test that I have set up, which is what I'm using for this demonstration. The identifier is what I want to get for this, and this is what you use for the audience parameter. So we will take this and paste it in here, and then the domain is the next thing that I'm going to need, and I can get that from my application, and it's this right here. So if I grab the domain, and then the next thing we need to do is set the OAuth resource metadata enabled to true. This is going to allow some metadata discovery to happen initially, which will say effectively this is the authentication server that I want to use, this is where it is, and this is the resource name, so that the actual back and forth for the OAuth flow can take place. This needs to be set to true in order for this to work. Okay, so the policy is now set up. There's one extra element that we're going to need to do here, and that is that we need to add a plugin to the Zuplo runtime that's going to help us to expose the well-known directory on our API gateway URL, so that that metadata discovery that we've just enabled can actually take place. So in the modules section right here, I'm going to add an empty module, and I'll call it zuplo.runtime.ts. And what I'm going to do is actually paste in the content of this, and I'll talk you through it. So here what we're doing is importing runtime extensions and the OAuth protected resource plugin, which is what we want to instantiate as soon as the gateway spins up. Our runtime init function adds a new plugin to runtime, and we need to provide an authorization server and a resource name in this case. The authorization server, you can see, is just the domain for the Auth0 account that we are using. And the resource name can be anything. In here it's OAuth MCP demo, but I can change it to to-do list MCP, or anything that I want to use in this case. And that is all we need to do for this. So with our new module set up and with our inbound route set up with the new Auth0 inbound policy, we've got everything in place now for the full OAuth flow to authenticate correctly via the MCP inspector to get people to actually log in correctly and then use our MCP server. So it won't be open anymore after this point once I click on save. So this is going to take those changes, it's going to deploy those back to the gateway. At this point, I'm going to head back over to the MCP inspector and click on this open auth settings so we can run through everything here and do the proper authentication flow and make sure that everything is working. Now, the MCP inspector is provided by the Model Context Protocol team. It's great for going through the process of checking whether you have things set up correctly, because it provides this guided OAuth flow progress that steps through every part of the flow for the OAuth 2.0 login, meaning that you can check everything in order and ensure that if there are any errors that are going to occur, you know where exactly in that flow those errors happened, so you can go ahead and try to fix whatever it is that's gone wrong. So we'll go through this one by one. Start with the metadata discovery, and we can see that's been successful. That has gone and found this .well-known directory, which is what we enabled with the plugin that we just added. So next we will do the client registration. That's also been successful. Next is the preparing authorization. Now we're actually going to have to click this in order to get a code for the login. So if I say accept, this code I need to copy, put it into the next step in that flow, and then we'll continue. And now it's actually going to create a token for the authentication. This is what will be used for making those authenticated requests. Now we've gone through this flow, what I can do is click on connect, and I'm now going to connect to the MCP server in an authenticated state, and I get the list of tools back for the MCP server, so I can go ahead and run this and get my list of tools. So there you go. That's how you can add OAuth very, very quickly to an MCP server hosted inside of the Zuplo API gateway. Full documentation is available on our docs portal for all of this, including guides for getting set up with Auth0 and Okta. And if you want to play with this a little bit more, there is also an example available at zuplo.com/examples for a remote MCP server with OAuth that you can work with locally, or you can deploy this to your Zuplo project and get started going through the demo just as I have done in these past few minutes. So here it is. There's a full guide here on working through every single one of the steps. So this will get you started if you haven't worked with an MCP server before, and certainly if you haven't applied OAuth to an MCP server before. I hope you found this video useful. Let us know if you have any questions, and check our documentation for anything that you're unsure about. Give us a shout if there's anything that we can help with. I'll see you soon.